Nimsa, he says, we see then that all of a person's journeys are because of a blemish in faith, i.e., in essence, an aspect of idolatry. Okay? And this is a basic thought, and Hasidic thought, and we do work like this. Okay? For if he had believed with a perfect faith that God could provide him with all his needs at home, he would certainly not have to set out on a journey. So consequently, the journey indicates a blemish in faith, i.e., an aspect of idolatry. Now, you got to work with me here. Just chill for a second. But you got to think it. You got to start to introduce it, because it's all about the thoughts that we think. And it's all because you really, when you think about it, the second commandment, don't worship any other gods, seems like, so for many people, that's a remote thing. No one's worshiping gods. No one's bowing down to statues these days. But it's not true. It's not true. If anybody has faith in something else other than God for even a slight thing, even the most slightest degree, according to all the Hasidic masters, according to the holy rabbis, that is an aspect in thought of idolatry. Because God is running every single thing, every single second of our lives. Every single thing, your parnasa, your wealth, your health, every single thing is completely run to the minutest detail, orchestrated to perfection for you and your life and for your growth. Nothing is nature. Nature does not exist. As a matter of fact, the numerical value of ha-teva, which is nature, is the same numerical value as God, Elohim, if you go and add it up. Okay? So really, who's running the show? God is absolutely. When we put our faith in something else other than God, what happens? Well, many things happen. One thing is God says, well, you just vacated a space and you took me out of the picture. I'll let you go ahead and rely on that if you think that's what you're relying on. It's very deep. It's very deep. Because in our lives, a lot of times because of habit, we tend to think, okay, we're going to rely on this or we'll rely on that, and I don't want to get into specific examples. But each person has to do their own work and has to try to chisel away and cut away and reevaluate all the things that they might have been believing in or relying on up until now in their lives. But in any case, the slightest taking away of faith, that God is completely running our lives, is an aspect of idolatry. So because of that, so God says, then you have to travel. Because you don't believe in me, listen, we're all faced with it. If a person would really believe, because really it's decreed at the head of the year in Rosh Hashanah, that all your parnasa is all guaranteed, it's already written in a book. It's already written. So if you really believe that really, you can sell hot water bottles out of your front house, you could bake cookies and make your parnasa, baking cookies in your house, brownies, gluten-free, okay? You don't need to go. Listen, but don't freak out. We have many places where our rabbis specifically put themselves in exile. We had huge rabbis in Europe. One was named the Vilna Gaon, disguised himself as a commoner and went traveling all over Europe. What are you going to say? He had lack of faith? There was Rabbi Elimelech and Rav Zusha, Hasidic rabbis, also decided to go travel around. They disguised themselves and no one would recognize them, to put themselves in exile. And they did it for various tikkunim, as what he says here in the end, the next page, okay? The next page says, interestingly enough, because Hashem, he says, okay, you didn't trust in me, therefore get out. He's not punishing. Therefore you got to travel, because you didn't believe in me. You don't have faith in me. I can bring you your parnasa at home. Okay? Therefore, get it. It's not like that. Really what it is the exact tikkun is in the traveling itself. As he says in the next page here in the second paragraph. And by virtue of his wandering, he rectifies the wandering he caused above, as it were. Okay? In other words, when he travels, and he has to travel, that is going to fix his EMUNAH. He doesn't have emunah, therefore he has to travel, because he really didn't have emunah. He worshipped the golden calf in a certain light aspect, in a certain aspect, in a certain formula. So therefore, he has to travel, but in that traveling itself comes the tikkun. All the time God uses that. What? Yeah, it's the second page. Second paragraph. By virtue of his wandering, he rectifies the wandering he caused above. Okay, because really what happens is, sadly enough, when a person doesn't believe in God, and therefore he has to wander, he causes God to wander. What happens here really is an exile. Like we say, it's either exile or it's redemption. God even goes into exile. What it means? You can't see God. Or you're blocking God. You're blocking God from manifesting. You block God with our immaturity from manifesting the way he really could. So therefore you gotta travel. If you believe that, go travel. So how does the traveling that the person has to do, the wandering, how does it fix his emunah? How does it fix his emunah? You know, a lot of times people, they live in their houses, they live in their little neighborhoods, you know. They're very complacent, right? You call that kind of person, even these days, definitely these days, even in those days, person who never left his shtetl, never, you know, you'd say he's not a maven. He's not a maven. Maven means he doesn't really know. He's not very worldly. He doesn't really understand what's going on. Yes, you have to get out of the comfort zone. When you get out of the comfort zone, what happens? You have to travel. What was the word? Uncomfortable. There's another word. Vulnerable. Person is vulnerable. Okay, my Rosh Yeshiva, he once, Rosh Yeshiva told us a story that his Rebbe would, sometimes he would send guys to distant places on Friday to go, you have to go to this, you got to raise money and find a place for Shabbos, of course, because it's Friday. He'd send students from his yeshiva to some Hooper's Dorton place, and they got to go ahead and find, not only got to try to raise money for the yeshiva, they got to find a place for Shabbos. So they got to wander door to door looking for mezuzah. They got no place. They're completely vulnerable. Maybe at least he's got somebody else there. But listen, I left LA when I was just turning 19 years old. Alone, packed all my bags, quit the job, sold the car. Something going on over there? Someone hiccuped? Okay. I'm watching you. Okay. I left home at 19 years old. I look back at it, I'm like, wow, it was crazy. What was inside of me? Okay, I had some kind of bug, okay? Some kind of idea, go and travel. And I didn't even go to Israel because I didn't even know anything about Israel. Very little about Israel, okay? I traveled all around Europe. I was in places where I thought I was going to get eaten alive, okay? You know, really, I thought I was in really dungy places. And here I was, a clean-cut California kid, you know. I walk into the youth hostel in the morning. Hi, guys. And these guys are waking up, you know. They looked like they were going to eat me for breakfast, okay. All around Europe, very vulnerable. But I saw at the end, God was with me. Because what happens when you travel, then you have an opportunity to see God in your life. Yeah.
You save a lot of money to travel at that age when you were rich?
No, I wasn't rich. It cost a lot. But, you know, whatever, I made it. It's much more expensive nowadays. It was youth hostels. I had to sleep once in a train station, okay? Because they didn't have it. There was no accommodation. It was great. It was great. I wouldn't do it anymore. It was great. Okay. Backpacking for me was nerdish, so I had big duffel bags that I slept and I built my arms like that, okay? I was crazy, okay? In any case, I saw God, okay? Because he led me here, he led me there. Afterwards. Okay, and that's what gets into the next point. But just let's this one point here for now. This point right here for now is because you have to travel and in your traveling, of course, you're going to be in situations where those guys, my Rosh Hashiva sent to this outer town, Hoopersdorten place, Erev Shabbos, they got to knock on this guy's door. Hi, we need a place for Shabbos. You guys, the only thing I have for Shabbos is like this challah and a can of fish. You can stay. And they all shared this one can of fish the whole Shabbos, and they were satisfied. Somehow, for some reason, they weren't hungry. Bizarre. Okay? Right? So, you go in these situations, in wild situations, and out of your comfort zone, and only then are you going to see God. Only then is your EMUNAH going to be stronger. Okay? Some people, no, I never leave my comfort zone. Right? No. It's not about that. And then we come to now the explanation. There's a great Rashi, okay? The Rashi, in the beginning there, he explains, okay? Mashal HaMelech, he brings a parable of a king. That his son was sick, and he had to bring him to a very far place for his healing. And once that he was coming back, on their way back, after the son got healed, so then his father started to go ahead and count all of the places. That's why we're counting all of these places, by the way. You're counting these 42. Why is God going over every single one of these 42? So Rashi, the 11th century commentator, is saying, bringing this from an earlier text, that the parable of a king who's bringing his son after he's healed on his way back, and he's counting. They're going back, showing. Do you remember here? Here we slept and we were cold. It was very cold that night. You remember here you had a headache. Do you remember here we were here and the roof caved in? Do you remember here this would happen and this would happen? And he was like counting each and every place. Do you remember here, this would happen here, you got bitten by bugs, the mosquitoes. Every single place. And this is the idea here. The idea here is for us, is that each and every single one of the places, the positions in our lives, these 42 steps in all of our lives, okay? God, in the end of days, after the healing, okay, when we're, God willing, will be refined souls, okay? And we'll reach that completion, and we reach our own personal land of Israel. God will show us how you know why you had to lose that job? You had to lose that job because of this. You know why this relationship didn't work out and you had to get that divorce? You know why this, God forbid, this child died? You know why you lost your parent here? You know why each and every person, God is going to go ahead and count each and every one of us exactly why it happened and what he needed to happen and the unbelievable lesson that was learned and the unbelievable what you gained from each and every single one of those steps in life. So just like here, we enumerate the 42 steps, each and every one of us, God is going to count and tell you, you know why you had to lose, why you had to, and everything's going to make complete and total sense. And you're going to go, oh, I got it. Or we can do what we really have to do. And this comes to an unbelievable midrash. Unbelievable midrash. It sinks in me all the time. I don't know if I gave this class before. Maybe I did. Okay, thank you. So it comes from a Midrash Rabbah. It says, Amar Rabbi Yitzhak bar Marion, this. He says, the verses come to teach. If a person does a mitzvah, he should do it with the complete and total heart. He has to do it with every single thing he's got. Because now why? Because Reuven, he takes three people that we have in the Chumash. He has Reuven, Aaron, and Boaz. Reuven, you remember Reuven? Anybody know anything about Reuven? What about Reuven? First son of Yaakov.
Yeah.
What did he do?
He did something bad.
He did something bad. He also did something good.
Yeah, I found a way not to kill Joseph.
Ah, beautiful. So here's how the language is. Follow me. Okay? That if Reuben would know what God would write about him in the 5 books of Moses, if Reuben at the time would know about it, right? Because it says in Genesis, and Reuben heard, right, what the brothers were conspiring against Joseph. V'yatzilehum yadam, and he saved them from their hand. He says, don't kill him, throw him in the hole. If Reuben would have known that they were going to write that about him in the Chumash, he would have put him on his shoulders and carried him right to his father in front of everybody. He would have told them all where they can go, and he says no. Hayamolicho etzel aviv, right then and there. Ilu haya yodea Aaron. If Aaron, now Aaron we know about. Aaron, actually Moshe at the burning bush was arguing with God for 7 days, right? He didn't want to go. He didn't want to go. 7 days. Can you imagine how many times can you say no? Right? For 7 days, he finally, he's told, you got to go back. You got to go back and get the Jewish people out. He's on his way to go get the Jewish people. And God tells him, Aaron is coming to greet you. And he's happy. And Aaron comes to greet him, and Aaron is happy. And the verse said so. But if Aaron would have known that the Kodesh Baruch Hu would write about him, behold, here comes Aaron, he's coming to meet you. If Aaron would have known that, he would have brought a whole 50-piece band. He would have brought a whole entourage of musicians and dancers to greet Moshe. He was happy. It says he was happy in his heart. If he would have known, he would have done it much more. Okay? And then we have the third. Okay? If Boaz, remember Boaz? Boaz in the book of Ruth. Boaz was the field, the owner of all the crops, running the show. He was the big boss. Right? And here comes Ruth, this strange Moabite woman. Who's that Moabite woman? What's her, right? But Ruth, what does Boaz do? He extends himself. You know what he does? He gives her some grain. He gives her some cereal. Give her a bowl of cereal. Right? Everybody else is kicking her, right? Throwing rocks at her. Give her a bowl of cereal, man. Right? If he would have known that, would have wrote about that in the Megillah, right? He would have mamish just slaughtered a cow, a fat cow, and made steaks. Would have done barbecue big time. Right? If he would have known, right? There's lots to go into this, okay? And the point is it's not that they would have just, they would have done it greater for their own publicity. That's not the poor purpose. They don't do, if they would have known, they would have done it bigger. It's not because, if they knew they were right about me, I would have done. That's not the point. Every single time, every single thing that these tzaddikim, that these righteous people do, they do it completely l'shem shamayim. They're doing it completely for what we have and a huge function and a huge direction of our life, which is called in order to fix the Shekhinah. Okay? All the tzaddikim know this. All those who learn the inner wisdom know that every single action is only for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to fix the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the divine presence. In order to fix the receptacle, in order to fix the world, to heal the world, that the world becomes a recipient of the divine presence in a greater way. In order to make God greater. So these three tzaddikim were saying, wow, if I would have known, I could have done a greater Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name. Okay? Everybody, they're into one thing. How do we sanctify God's name in a greater way? Okay? Every single direction, every single function, every single thought, every single intention is for that and that only. How do we make God's name greater? So if I would have known, if Reuben would have known, right, that God was going to write this, I would have done it. If Aaron would have known, I would have came out with the Rolling Stones. It would have played Mick Jagger, right? I would have hired Mick Jagger, right? No. Anyways, if I would have known, if Boaz would, I would have made, right? I would have had a fat cow, okay? And now comes the last one, okay? And we're going to end with here, the fourth example. Rabbi Cohen and Rabbi Yeshua, the Sachnin b'shem Rabbi Levi, in the name of Rabbi Levi. They continue this midrash and says, in the past, it was that if a man would do a mitzvah, he would do something special. The prophet at the time would write it down. Each person, their own Megillah. Let's say you had a neighborhood prophet. Humble has a prophet, whatever, Maurice Blasnalis, who was the prophet. So, he would know what everybody's doing, and he would write, and you'd have your own little Megillah. If a person did something of a mitzvah, the prophet would write it down. Now, you don't have prophets anymore. So what happens? And now, mitzvah, when a person does a mitzvah, who writes it? Who writes it? So it says Eliyahu writes it. Elijah the prophet, he writes it. And the King Messiah and the Holy One, blessed be He, they stamp it. And then those who fear God will speak each man to his friend. In other words, nowadays things are still being written. The Torah is not necessarily a sealed book. If you look actually in the second parsha of the book of Numbers, there's an interesting weird thing where there's two inverted nuns. Right? They're upside down and inverted. And it brings it down that really there's not 5 books of Moses, there's 7 books of Moses. Because that's a divider. In between those two nuns is a whole book, which is really 2 verses. And then there's a book before and there's a book after. So really in the book of Numbers there's 3 books. So really it's a total 7 books. But they say those 2 nuns and those 2 verses in there, in a very deep and Kabbalistic way, all of the letters permutate and recombine, and every single little thing that has happened will be recombined and reconfigured, and the Torah is still being written from those letters. It's still being written. And here comes the point. The point here is that when we're faced with challenges, and these are the Masa'ot, and these are the 42 travelings, and a lot of times it's going to be a stop-and-go traffic. I'm talking about in your life, not necessarily on, West Belfort, okay? Or whatever street. But in your life, it seems to be you're hitting a wall. How are you going to accept it? How are you going to face it? What direction are you going to bring yourself to? So the idea here is one Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, or mitzvah gedola liot b'simcha tamid. It's a special, rare opportunity every time that you're facing one of those 42 travelings. It's a challenge. You have to be able to know that the book is still being written. And here comes your challenge. And what are you going to do? How are you going to react to that? Are you going to say, this comes from Hashem? Comes from God, and it's part of my tikkun. It's part of my rectification. It's going to bring me to a greater place. This will bring me to a greater place. I don't know how. I don't have to know how. God's going to show you how after. Can we accept it with faith? Can we accept every single thing and meet the challenge and go way overboard? It's work. But the bottom line is we're all in a process. It's happening whether we like it or not. God is making us a vehicle to receive the infinite light. It's a 42-step process, 42-path recovery, or whatever you want to call it. Just another little thing I'll add at the end. So, it's to face it with joy, with unbelievable joy, that it's for absolutely the absolute best, and to have absolute emunah and faith in God to the nth degree.